Hey guys, Tyler Berger here with Bass Fishing HQ. The month of May is one of the best bass fishing months that you will experience all year long. It's a great time to catch big bass. It's a great time to catch a lot of bass. Today is all about how you approach the month of May. Stay tuned, it's gonna be a good one. This video is brought to you by the Bass Hat, which is this hat that I'm holding and wearing right now. It comes with a wooden bass patch on the top. Really unique hat. If you guys haven't checked them out, click the link below and you're gonna be able to pick up one of these hats and help the Bass Fishing HQ channel. The month of May is really one of the best months out of the year to go bass fishing. You can catch a lot of fish during the month of May, and you can also catch big bass during the month of May. But the thing is that the month of May can be a little bit tricky because depending on where you live in the country, you're typically gonna experience 3 different major phases of bass in the month of May. You might experience the pre-spawn, the spawn, and the post-spawn. So that can really make for a little bit tricky fishing, figuring out exactly what the fish are doing. Guys, if you haven't checked out the early spring or pre-spawn complete guide that I made, I'm gonna link that above. I'm also gonna link my post-spawn one above as well. And I'm also gonna put them in the description. This is a lot more detailed approach of those individual seasons. So if you guys haven't checked out those complete guides, click the link above or click the link below and you can check out those detailed descriptions of both the pre-spawn and the post-spawn. But right now, I wanna get into the lures that I like to throw during the month of May. And the reason that I like these particular lures is because they really work in basically all the phases you might experience. So whether you live up north and you're dealing with pre-spawn fish, or whether you live down south and you're actually dealing with post-spawn fish, or you have fish that are actually on beds and spawning, these lures tend to work really well no matter the condition. The first lure that I want to talk about, and I'm holding 2 up here, but the lure as a whole, whoa, some sticky hooks. The lure as a whole are big swim baits. Big swim baits, if you guys haven't thrown a bigger swim bait, whether that's a soft boot tail style swim bait like the one that I got here, or whether that's a glide bait like the one that I got here, and I'm gonna link this tackle in the description as well. This is a Fish Lab bluegill glide bait, a really cool bait, a really interesting bait. But anyways, guys, big swim baits are a really good bait to throw in the month of May. And again, whether you're fishing the pre-spawn, during the spawn, or in the post-spawn, these baits can work really well. During the pre-spawn, where I typically like to throw these bigger glide baits is when I have cleaner water. Typically, if I have clear water and I have some secondary points, I really like to throw these big baits across that point. Maybe there's a big laydown log or a dock or something like that on the point. This is a perfect example of where I'd like to fish these big baits. While the fish are actually spawning and on bed, these baits can be a very effective search tool. Now, fish will actually hit these when they're on beds, but if they don't hit them, typically they will at least show you where that fish is. So maybe you bring this glide bait right by a fish that's on a bed. He'll actually follow that bait or maybe even swipe at the bait, and then you'll be able to say, hey, there's a fish on a bed, I can go back and catch that fish. During the post-spawn, you typically have both a shad spawn starting to happen when that water hits 70 degrees, and maybe in late May, you might even have a bluegill spawn start to happen. And when you have shad spawns and when you have bluegill spawns, a great way to imitate those particular bait fish is with a big swim bait. So guys, a big swim bait is always gonna be tied on one of my rods during the month of May. The best things about these lures too is that they work in both lakes and in ponds. So whether you're a bank fisherman or whether you're an experienced tournament angler, a big swim bait should be tied on during the month of May. All right guys, so let's talk about the second lure. And again, this is a highly productive lure that you should definitely have tied up in the month of May, and that is a swim jig. A swim jig, guys, is, you guys already know. You know how effective a swim jig is. And guys, the thing that I really love about swim jigs is, like the big swim bait, they really work in all phases. Whether you're in the pre-spawn time frame, the spawn time frame, or the post-spawn time frame, a swim jig works really, really well in all those situations. Another thing that I love about a swim jig during the month of May is that it really works in really all types of watercolor. Whether you're fishing really clean water, you might want a little bit more of a green pumpkin or a natural colored swim jig. Or maybe you're fishing really, really muddy water. Guys, a swim jig will work in really, really muddy water, especially when you put a bigger cross style trailer on the back of it like this. That's gonna provide a lot of thump and really help bass to hone in on your swim jig. Now, there's a lot of different places that this can work, but one of my favorite places to fish a swim jig, anytime you have some sort of bank vegetation. Now, you might have willow grass, you might have pads. This is a great bait to use around that vegetation. Maybe it's some cattails. You're just gonna swim this jig past all that cover, and a lot of times you're gonna see fish just absolutely blow up on the swim jig. And again, they're gonna do that during the pre-spawn and the post-spawn. And guys, similar to the swim bait, if you're fishing this around the spawn, you might have fish actually hit the bait, but a lot of times you might just have fish kind of swipe up on the bait, and that's gonna allow you to pinpoint where that bass is. So maybe you can go in with some soft plastic lures and actually catch that bass that might be on a bed. It works in the pre-spawn, the spawn, the post-spawn, muddy water, it works in clean water. It should be tied on in the month of May because it's simply one of the best lures you can have. All right, guys, so the last lure that I want to talk about is the floating worm. And guys, if you haven't seen the video that I did on the floating worm, I definitely suggest that you watch that because I kind of go into this a little bit more detailed. The thing is when I say floating worm, that doesn't necessarily mean that the worm is actually floating. That is just the name for the technique that I'm talking about. This is a zoom trick worm. It's no secret lure or anything like that, but this is the worm that I use when I'm fishing a floating worm technique or pattern. Now, typically when you fish a floating worm, you're fishing it weightless. And again, it's not actually floating. It actually just sinks extremely, extremely, extremely slow. And that really slow rate of fall and just letting that bait twitch really close to the surface of the water really can trigger a lot of bass in the month of May. Again, whether you're fishing in the pre-spawn, during the spawn, or in the post-spawn, a floating worm is a really, really good bait. Now, a floating worm can be rigged a number of different ways. You can rig it Texas rigged. You can also rig it wacky rigged. I really like to rig it wacky style. I've had a lot of luck doing that. During the pre-spawn, I like to fish this around cover. So whether that's a clump of grass or a rock or a stump, I really like to fish this around cover. I like to keep it pretty high in the water column. As the bass start to bed, again, this can help you pinpoint where bass are. They're gonna come up, they might swipe at it, they might get the bait itself, but this is a great bait to also use when fish are actually bedding. During the post-spawn, the place that I love to fish a floating worm is around fry garters. Typically, when the fry actually start to hatch, you're gonna have a male stay with that fry for a long time. Guys, that bass will always fall for a floating worm. I'm telling you, it works really, really well. Guys, these are the 3 lures that you should have tied in the month of May. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like. Please leave a comment if you have questions, and please subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next video.